You're watching and listening to Conscious Evolution Media, shifting global consciousness at consciousevolutionmedia.com.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Kids Talk Foundation, a global nonprofit organization providing youth advocacy, television programming, and training services in the United States, along with comprehensive medical and educational services for the developing world, most recently in Kenya, Africa, where Kids Talk Foundation provides a feeding program, medical care, and educational services to over 1,300 young people each day. Please help our youth and place your donation. Go to www.kidstalk.org.
Are you in the entertainment industry? If you answered yes and you want to promote yourself, your passion, and profession, check out Creative Independent Artist magazines at CIAartists.com. Endorsed by Kids Talk Foundation worldwide.
Welcome to the Ninon Speaks Internet TV show. Ninon is an international entrepreneur and philanthropist who's become an influential and positive role model for thousands of people all over the world. Drawing on a rich tapestry of experience from her adventures both in front of and behind the camera, Ninon captivates, entertains, and inspires audiences from all walks of life. Her motto is, "Nothing happens without you." Now, here's your host, Ninon de Verde Rosa.
Welcome to Ninon Speaks Media Image. Yes, I always say we have fabulous guests, and each one has a different something to bring into this world, this confusing world we have out there. There's so many different avenues right now that have to be addressed, and so much going on, and so many changes, especially in the last probably 4 or 5 years with the economy and real estate and families and losing homes and buying homes and all this crazy stuff that's going on. And then, of course, this all affects the immediate family. And when you talk about the immediate family, you talk about Rosalind Sadaka, who is our guest today, and she is very much involved in the immediate family. She's recognized for a program she has, which is called The Voice of Child-Centered Divorce. It's an amazing program. Do we really know what goes on in a child's mind when we're talking about a divorce? You know how the mother and fathers, they think they're being quiet, and the kids are sort of hiding behind the door because they want to hear every word that's going on. And they do that, but we don't think. They think, oh no, they're fast asleep in bed. She's written many books. She is definitely involved with the children, and then the divorces. And then also, she's involved in how do you get married again when you're 40, 50, or 60, even maybe 70? Let me introduce you to Rosalind Sadaka. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, absolutely. And obviously, you know, I invite, by invitation only, guests that really have something that really touches my heart. And you really do with children and divorces. And it was so funny because I did a children's show called Voices of Tomorrow. And my very first show was children and divorces. It was my first show. And it was, and it opened my eyes up because this little girl, she was about 7 years old, 6 or 7, and she turned around to me, and you've got these 3 cameras with this whole thing going, and she said, "I think my parents got divorced because of me." And the look on her face, she was so serious, and that's what she was thinking. So, and this is your subject. How did you get to this children and divorces?
Well, through my own divorce. My son was 11 years old when I was getting a divorce, and I was traumatized about how to break the news to him. I stayed up for weeks of sleepless nights, tossing and turning, not knowing what to say and exactly how to say it. And the books out there, they told you what to say, but they never really told you how to do it. And finally, one night at 4 in the morning, I came up with an idea. I ultimately used it, and it turned out to be the basis of my book, but the book was 15 years later. So it was something I tried in my own life. I helped other people. I became a divorce and parenting coach, and then I wrote, How Do I Tell the Kids About the Divorce, 15 years later. And
that's amazing, because now your son is all grown up.
Yes.
And obviously, you went through it, but I would imagine, every child is different. Every mother and father are different. The way a father would say it is different to the way the mother would say it. And then you've also got, on top of that, you've got two angry people at each other. Because
Yes.
if they weren't angry, they wouldn't be divorcing, or if they didn't have their differences, they wouldn't be divorcing. So they're both going to try to attract the child in a different way to get the child on their side. How did you manage that?
What's is so important to understand is that children have different psyches than we do. And sometimes parents assume that they think like us and understand like us, and they don't. So children have a tendency to blame themselves when a divorce happens, even if parents are just fighting and angry. Children will internalize it and think, oh, maybe if I didn't act out yesterday and I was bad in school, maybe mom and dad wouldn't be fighting. So we have to protect them in every possible way because they internalize. And we have to make sure that they understand that none of this is their fault. Even if parents are fighting about the kids, it's not the kids'
It's
fault.
not the kids' fault. No, because sometimes the kids will hear something, and I think when parents are arguing, well, if David hadn't done that, and he has his name, so do
Hmm.
we have to keep the children's names out of this of an argument in the house where they are and they can hear every word?
The best thing to do, and I think every divorce expert on the planet will agree, is when parents fight on the children on any level, it hurts them. It's very disruptive to their emotional well being, and that's what causes most of the scars. So, even in families where they don't have a divorce, but there's fighting and tension and discord, the children are affected. If you have to fight, you have to make sure you're not around the children or on the phone or in the next room where they could hear the battles.
Why do you think why are we having so many divorces now? So many kind of, oh, I'm divorcing. It's like you say something a little out of balance to the other person, immediately they want a divorce. Are we all short fused?
Well, we are. It's a different culture than it used to be, but believe it or not, the divorce rate is going down. But there's another issue. There are more and more families that haven't married, but they're still getting divorced. They're still separating and splitting, and the children are still getting the consequences of losing mom or dad and not having access to both parents. So whether it's a legal divorce or whether it's just a separation in life, the children suffer either way, and those numbers are going up. It's a very sad situation, but there are ways of understanding and educating parents so that they don't make some of the worst mistakes. And then the children have a chance to grow up and enjoy their childhood and have a happy life.
Do you think we should be, or the younger generation, me, I'm over having children, that's for sure. But you and I both. But
Yes.
but do you think that they should start thinking a little bit deeper before they have children, before
Oh,
they're young and they start thinking, oh, I'm going to have children, how fun it would be, and love, da, 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 until all of a sudden the kids like 3 or 4 or 5, 6, whatever, because they all seem to be very young right now when they separate or get a divorce. I think that the message out there we should be giving is just be careful the intention of having a child.
I totally agree. You know, there are manuals for every single thing that we buy nowadays, but no one gives you a manual for being a parent. People learn the hard way, and a lot of people go into it thinking they're playing with dolls. They don't understand the huge impact it has on a marriage and on life, the sacrifices we make, and the changes to any marriage when children come along. Parents do need to learn and understand so that they make better decisions before they're having children and then understand the emotional impact on everything they do decide after they have children.
Yeah, and the responsibility. I mean, there's a tremendous responsibility of bringing up a child. I mean, everybody thinks, oh, time the child's 18, that's the end of it. Well, that's quite
Oh,
actually the
oh,
opposite. It's probably the beginning of
oh,
it.
that's right.
And until you actually pass away, that you are obligated to that child. I don't care what anyone says, but that's part of you. It's part of your family. And I don't think people really sort of look at it that way.
Yeah, they don't understand. And they really don't understand that if they are going to separate from one another, what the impact on the children is, because children naturally, they innately love both mom and dad. Even
Oh,
if one of the parents isn't a good parent by our standards, children love their parents. And so when they lose connection to one of the parents, either because the parent is disinterested or one parent is alienating the children from the other parent, or because of distance or other issues, the children feel hurt. And in today's technology, such as video chats and things like that, there are ways for families to stay connected.
hello.
Parents need to be on the same page so that they understand the fact that disrespecting the other parent in front of the children is going to harm the children's psyches. And
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, sure, mothers and fathers, well, I want the kid on my side, and I want the kid on
mhm,
my side. This is just a kid. This is a kid that, as you said at the beginning here, that they love both parents, and they love them equally. One's mummy and one's daddy, and daddy plays his role, and mummy plays her role. How do we get the fathers more? And I'm saying the fathers because it always, not always, but it seems that the mothers are the ones that take care of the children, and the fathers, a lot of them sort of disappear or whatever they do. How do we get the fathers more involved if there is a divorce, a separation, whatever it is?
well, there is a tendency, the trend is with the younger generation that fathers are more involved than ever before in history. And a
Hmm.
lot of fathers are very upset because the courts are antiquated and still treating them as if they're second level parents. So there are many fathers support groups out there trying to get the courts to understand that they want to parent just as much as the mothers. And it's important that we stop creating a gender gap between moms or dads being better, and understanding that there were irresponsible, poor parents on both sides, and then there were wonderful ones. And we have to educate parents to understand the deep responsibility that having a child is, and understanding that children feel very guilty and torn and confused when we force them into certain situations, when we ask them to make decisions about who do you want to be with, mom or dad? It may sound like a simple question, but the child is feeling so guilty. Whoever they choose, they lose.
That's
And
absolutely right. Because if they say I want to be with mummy, then you hate daddy. You want to be with daddy, you hate mummy, and that we must understand that sort of in between bit
yes,
and I don't think we understand the meaning when we say, well, who do you want to be with? I think we
yeah.
just kind of say it, but
hmm
we should be careful on when we say something like that, right?
We have to be very careful of every decision we make, and we have to think of the decisions through the eyes of the child. You have to put yourself in little Susie and little Johnny's eyes and in their feet and see the world as a 2-year old or a 7-year old or a 12-year old or an 18-year old, and then to understand it from the confusion that they have, because children are trying to fix it. They want to put mom and dad together. And first, they have to understand that this is never going to happen. Mom and dad will never be married again, if that's the case. And then they have to understand that mom and dad will always be your mom and dad. You don't have to lose your mom or your dad because of a divorce. Life can go on, and it can be looked at as another chapter in our family's life. We may
Yeah.
have two homes, but we're still mom and dad. We'll still always love you, because some children get very afraid that mom and dad are going to divorce them.
You just gave out a most incredible message, and the message you just gave out is the children think they're going to lose mum and dad, and you
Yes.
just said that they will never lose mum and dad. It doesn't matter where they go, what they do, they will always have their original mother. They might have a few stepmothers in between,
Mm-hmm.
or they might have a few stepfathers in between, but the actual biological mother and father. And I think the younger generation should understand that and know that they'll always be they will always be their parents. They're never going to change unless they pass away, but they're
Yes.
never going to change. And I don't think they understand that.
And with that, parents have to emphasize, and we will always love you. that the love from the parent is not going to change the way mom and dad's love for each other may have. That's very important for children to get. They need the security of knowing that, because that's the foundation of all their fears when a divorce takes place. So if we give them security and we reinforce the message of that love,
Yeah.
they're able to accept shifts and changes and differences in their lives. But those are the most important things that they need to understand.
So what is your secret? You've obviously got a secret. You obviously succeeded with your own child. I'm assuming that that you succeeded because of what you are doing. So because of what you did, you've now become a voice for children.
Yes.
What is your secret to knowing more than what the parents know, or what we all know out there with children?
I understood immediately that my son loved his dad, and that if I did anything to put down his dad or diminish the role that his father played in his life, that he would resent me for it. And so we cooperated together, we co-parented together, and as much as possible for the big occasions, special birthdays and holidays and sport events and graduations and all the way through life, we were both there. So he had his mom and dad, and even when his dad moved on and started dating and ultimately remarried, and I started dating and ultimately remarried, we were still there at all of the important
What was
life.
what was your son's reaction when you actually started dating and you kind of brought your first guy home? I would imagine you'd have to bring him home sometime.
Yes, at some point. And that's a very important issue, how to do it properly. But what made it okay with my son is that he never was threatened with losing his dad. His dad was always his dad. So any man that I brought into my life was a friend, a pal, a male figure, but he was never replacing dad.
And
And that
who made sure of that? Did you make sure of that, or did your
Well,
ex-husband make sure of that?
we both agreed. There was never any doubt, because I knew that emotionally that would have alienated my son from me, and I didn't want to do that. So when the greatest gift in my life was when my son, when he was a young man in his early 20s, he came to me one day and he said, "You know, Ma, you and Dad did a fabulous job with the divorce, because I have so many friends whose parents got divorced and they hate their parents, or they suffered so much. Thank you for doing such a great job." And
I
that
think
to me was the
yeah,
greatest
well,
achievement of my life.
absolutely, because if he recognized that, and children, they obviously talk to other children. He wasn't the only one coming from divorced parents. So there was
Right.
other children surrounding in school. I'm sure there was more than we probably think there is. Did you ever ask him what he discussed at school with other kids and how he
Oh,
got
yeah.
around it?
Yeah, and he told me that so many of his friends were angry at his parents and hated them and resented this and that, and there was a lot of issues, a lot of struggle, and we remained very close. He's very close to his father today. He's very close to me, and he wrote the foreword to my book, and he talked a little bit about his personal story, because he was only 11 when the divorce took place. So we raised him as co-parents from 11 on, and now he's a young man, married, talking about having children of his own.
Oh, how
And
wonderful. So he's not afraid to do that. I was going to say, what
no,
is the repercussion on actually a son or daughter getting married and then having children after they've been through a divorce where they've been sort of one here and one there and all this stuff going on? The repercussion. So his repercussion is he's okay.
he was okay. And I'll tell you, one of the most important questions parents can ask themselves today when their children are young, early on in the divorce, that'll impact the future. If you could ask yourself, what will my children say to us about how we handle the divorce when they're grown adults? Because it's hard to imagine when you have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old in the house that they're ever going to be 20 and 30 and 40. But they do grow up, and they will be, as we know. And if you could think about what they're going to say to you, it makes you more responsible. It holds you accountable, and it makes you realize you can't pull the wool over their eyes. You maybe can when they're 7, but not
Yes.
when they're, and maybe it's 17, but it's not going to stay that way. And so you have to think about the consequences of every decision you make. And that really holds you to the fire and keeps you from giving in to the emotion, because people, as you said in the beginning, are very angry and we're in drama and we're
Yeah.
emotionally distraught and we hate that other person for what they did to us. And it's
Oh.
so easy to use the children as a tool,
Instrument, yeah, they're used like
as an
thrown
instrument.
back and
Yes,
forth, and they're like,
yes,
you
and
know,
manipulate them and use them to get to align with our sides and be our friends and confidants and tell them how terrible their other parent is. And it's so tempting to do that, but that is the seed of all of the emotional damage for the children and the long-term consequences of having kids who are afraid to get married and afraid to have children and afraid of relationships because they saw such poor role models.
absolutely. And on that, I just want anybody tuning in, we are actually with Ninon Speaks, and we're talking with Rosalind Sadaka. She is the voice for children. She's the most amazing woman. She's giving us hints on how we can handle, hopefully, not anybody out there going through a divorce, but I'm sure there's a few people going through a divorce or a separation, how to handle your children and how to sort of understand them and whatever you say. But this is even without children. You have to remember whatever you say and do in life is going to come back and hit you somewhere in the face. So if you're going to
Yes.
spread out different things out there in life, don't ever think that they go under the carpet and they brush away and then it doesn't matter. They come back, believe me, they can come back in 10 years or 20 years, and you think to yourself, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't done that. So I think not only with our children, we have to be careful with what we actually put out there in the world. Would that be true?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses for adults throughout our culture is that they don't understand that there are consequences for every behavior and every action. And if we thought first about consequences, we would be very different in a lot of the things we do and say. The bullying issue, the violence issues, so much of the disrespect that we have between people would change because we would be thinking first before we acted. And
Yes,
it's as
absolutely.
parents, it's really important.
Do we have much bullying in school from other children to other children when a child's parents are getting divorced? Do they have much, do they do make fun of them or do they pick on them in school because mom and dad are getting a divorce?
In some cases, but it isn't the stigma it used to be. In our generation, it was much more of a stigma because it was
Oh,
more
yeah.
rare. Today, so many children come from divorce that it isn't the brunt of it. But what happens is children who aren't emotionally stable act out. And they act out after divorce. And if parents aren't watching your children acutely, month after month, year after year, if they start behaving in aggressive manners or turning inward and get acting depressed, if their grades change in school, if their attitude towards things change, if they start bullying or showing behaviors that are disrespectful, then something is going on within them. And very often it's because they're not feeling secure. They're not feeling loved. Their lives were caught torn apart and they don't know how to handle it as children. And so they do what they do, and they usually either act out or turn in. And either way, that creates problems.
How does a parent understand their child? Because normally I believe that it all starts in the home. And whatever sort of kind of going on in the home, if there's aggravation or there's swearing or there's some uncomfortable feelings at home, and then they take that to school and then they don't do their work right and they don't play with other kids and they start this starts setting in.
Hmm.
How do we avoid it sets in school, you know, and all of a sudden you're in school because kids are in school for an awful long time now, at least from 8:30 to 4 sometimes, or even 6 o'clock because of the working schedule now of many
Yes.
parents. They spend all this time in school, and does the anger really start at home and they take it to school, or is it with at school with mixing with the kids?
No, most things do start in our homes. The parents have the initial impact on children. Those early years from birth to 5 are especially important. And all studies have shown that when children are living with discord, when there's tension and anxiety,
Mhm.
either fighting or the opposite, apathy and the parents are just not happily married, the impact usually comes across to the children. They pick up on it. They
Uh,
feel it.
yeah, they pick up on all that stuff. Like if the parents are lazy and they're watching television and they get a little overweight and all this stuff, the children kind of pick that up, don't they?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what happens. And then some children are more vulnerable at school to children who happen to be more aggressive and act out in that way. So there's always an impact that parents can have to change things at home if they're aware of what they're doing. And that's the basis of the Child-Centered Divorce Network that I founded, is to give parents advice, information, insight, and strategies and tools and resources so that they can make the very best decisions through any facet of being married and moving on into divorce, and then the aftermath of divorce. And then if they choose to start over again, that's another important area, because you don't want to repeat old patterns. You don't want to get a divorce and
No,
then just go dating again and pick up another person with the same,
get
a
another
different,
divorce.
right.
Yeah.
So you have to look and ask yourself some very serious questions, like, what part did I play in the divorce? No one likes to look at it, and everyone wants to point the finger and blame.
Oh
But
yeah, we
the
all blame everybody else.
right.
Absolutely.
But the
Um,
truth is, we all play a part in everything that we do.
but we all have to sort of face it sometime of our life. So we have to be very careful what we actually, well, not careful, but we have to think of what we put out there and what we say. You've got down here, how do you tell a child if the child hasn't sort of already heard already? How do you tell a child, this is for our audience out there, we're divorcing. What do you actually say to a child? We're going to get a divorce.
Well, what I did is I actually, in advance, created a storybook with photos and text that I wrote, telling my son that mom and dad have been feeling, there's been a lot of tension at home. Mom and dad are not getting along. And we both decided that life would be happier for everyone in the family if we had two homes and you were with mom sometimes and dad sometimes. And this is not about blame. It's not about who's good and who's bad, because you never get into that with your children. This is about change. It's like another chapter in our life. And change is a natural part of life. Just like you change grades in school, you change haircuts, you change sports, clothing styles. This is a change for our family, but we're still a family, and mom and dad will always be your mom and dad and will always love you. And I put that message in this storybook and presented it to him at the time of telling him about the divorce. And the value of that is that it works as a script for the parents, because the message has already been written down so they don't forget anything important. And the children can reread the storybook with pictures about them over and over again, and it gives them something that reinforces the positive message. I happen to have the original book, which is very, very old here, but just to show you that I did it in a simple scrapbook, a storybook.
I think it's upside down.
You're right. Yes, there it is. And so
this was your beginning when you knew several months before you were divorcing, you actually knew.
Several weeks before. It wasn't months, but that is what I did. Now, what happened is that I waited, as I said, 15 years before I wrote my book. And my book, How Do I Tell the Kids About the Divorce? Create a Storybook Guide to Preparing Your Children with Love, has fill-in-the-blank templates that I created, age appropriate, so parents can just customize a little bit of their story, but most of the text is written for them. So all they need to do is download, customize the text, and then print it out and put it into a
where can they get this? Is a free book you're giving away, actually.
This is not the free book, because this has 6 psychotherapists contributing to it. This book is available at childcentereddivorce.com or howdoitellthekids.com, and that's the only place you could find it, is at my website.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you, this is the total opposite question to what we're doing.
Okay.
How do we stop parents, or how do we try to, because this didn't happen years ago, how do we keep parents together, that they have something very beautiful, that they had something very beautiful, and they've got a few little bumps in the road, and then they've got a couple of kids. How can we keep this together? What is your advice? Because I'm quite sure you would like to see them staying together.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
How can they
Par-
what can they get rid of that anger within them they both
yes.
have? How do they get rid of it to kind of be able to get on?
Well,
Because they have that love.
the most important thing that parents can learn are better communication skills. Most of the problems in our world, between nations as well as between parents, has to do with miscommunication and poor communication. People want to feel heard and understood, and we don't listen. We're always speaking, but we're not listening well. And
Mhm.
when we learn communication skills, we learn to respect each other more because we realize that deep down inside, all of us have the same feelings and the same needs. What
Yes.
happens is that parents start getting so caught up in their own selves that they're not paying as much attention to the spouse. The spouse is feeling unappreciated. And instead of bringing it up and having a serious conversation, they get sarcastic and aloof or nasty or do something to hurt you back. And then you're feeling hurt. And so you do something to hurt them back. And before you know it, a few years have passed, and you have wounded people walking around in a marriage that used to be filled with love. And no one has the skills to understand or bring it up or go to therapy and get some attention brought to the situation to change it. Because if you shift the way you speak to one another and you get back into a place of respect for one another,
Mhm.
everything changes in life.
So it's like kind of losing respect for each other, and that
Yes.
applies with friends. You know, I've got a lot of friends, and sometimes they do things that I really don't like, or rubs my little feathers the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And but then how I handle that is I look at it and say, well, they're not me. They're not saying it the way as I would say it, or they're not doing it the way I would do it, or whatever the case may be. So why should I judge them, and why should I really be angry with them? And if I like them that much, I could really let that pass through. But also, is it sort of nice to be able to talk to your friend about it?
Yes, of course it is. And good friends you can do that with. But what happens is we lose communication skills with the people who
Yeah.
are closest to us, especially our spouses, and then we're no longer friends.
No.
We're sleepwalking through marriage. And then it's very easy for temptations to come along.
But
And
then
that's,
aren't we also sleepwalking through life? Because if we let this
yes,
go on 4 or 5 years, we're actually not living life, are we? To this,
yes,
because we've always got this anger thing floating around.
so true. Yes, we need to be more aware and and appreciative of every moment of our lives. And we focus more on inner joy and less on just materialistic things. We think something materialistic is going to give us pleasure,
Yeah.
but it lasts for a very short time in comparison to the pleasure of feeling love and being appreciated and being respected.
So how come years ago, well, not that many years ago, that marriages stayed together? My mum and dad were married for 68 years.
Well,
And I
that
know people that are still married and they're fine and everything. I know they have their ups and downs, but
That's a cultural change. It's not that people got along better. It's just that there was a stigma about it. And so culture has changed, society has shifted, and people are much more flippant about staying together and moving on. It doesn't mean that people were more happily married in other decades. It means that that's just the way people had affairs behind backs, and it was just considered protocol in some cultures. People lived in with different rules and mores, but changing people, they're not really changing as much as it may appear. Our values are changing externally, but the same issues are going on inside people. They just are expressing it in different ways now with more freedom.
and actually, I personally think that's wonderful because to live in a life or live in a world where you're not really happy because of protocol, you've got to stay there, you've got to do what you do. So
Exactly.
actually, it's a little more healthier now, actually. But I think my main thing and your main thing is to actually to make sure what you have brought into this world, to make sure you're handling your children and taking care of them and making sure they have a life that's going to be very different to your life, although it might be your child and your genes and your husband's or boyfriend or whatever the case is both the genes together, and this child's going to grow up as part of you anyway. But for them to be able to live their life and not to worry so much or have to stay in a situation because of protocol, that is actually, I think, healthier, don't you?
I agree. Yes, definitely.
To live a life. Now, let me ask a question. What do you mean by dangerous mistakes? What would be one dangerous mistake that
Well,
we all make, whether we're married or divorced or whatever we are? What are mistakes we make in our life?
Well, we've discussed many of the dangerous mistakes. The most dangerous are the ones for the children when we are divorced, and those are the mistakes: fighting in front of them, making children feel that they were to blame for the situation, using your children as spies and saying, what's going on at dad's house, and what did he say, and where did he take you, and also using your children as messengers, saying, tell your mommy that I'm going to pick you up at 2 o'clock. It's not the children's place to be getting involved in doing your work. And so all of those things put pressure on children and create anxiety. And what we're trying to do is minimize the anxiety on the children who are affected by divorce, because their lives are already being affected enough. They're having enough emotional turmoil. We want to simplify their life as much as possible, keep the same whatever can be the same, and if there are changes, make them as smooth and easy a transition as possible.
Yeah.
Yes.
On that, I just want our audience, we're listening to Ninon Speaks, and we have a wonderful Rosalind Sadaka with us, and she's talking all about children. But we're going to switch around, and we're going to do a little switcheroo here, Rosalind. We're now going to go into this, and I love this part actually as well. We're going into how does a woman or a man 40, 50, 60, 70, how do they start dating again? I think 40 is quite easy. I think 50 might be quite easy, but I think going into the 60s and 70s, I see a lot of women out there that are kind of looking at these guys that are looking at these young girls, and they want to date the 35-year-old, not the 60-year-old.
Yes, yes.
And then you've got the 80-year-olds that want to date the 60-year-olds, but the 60-year-olds don't want to become a nurse for the 80-year-old. How do we handle all? I mean, this is a whole pot out there, because you've got a lot of, single older people out there. What do they do?
This is a self-esteem issue. If you're in midlife and older life and you have high self-esteem, then you will attract a partner who's vivacious and interesting and stimulating and be able to be dating. If you go into the situation saying, who's going to want me? I'm old and dumpy, or I'm too fat, or I'm too wrinkled, or whatever it is that we're telling ourselves. And women are, of course, famous for telling ourselves these put downs even much more than men. Absolutely. If you do that, you set yourself up for failure, because if you don't feel good about yourself and believe in yourself and love yourself, no one is going to want to love you either. So we talk about doing the inner work first. If you're getting ready to get back out into the dating world, and it's been some decades since you've done it, you need to really look inside and get rid of the baggage you're holding. What happened in your last relationship, whether you're a widow or whether you're divorced, there's baggage, and there's things that you have to let go of. You have to forgive yourself. You have to forgive the past. You have to let go of the past, and you have to be open and receptive to a new partner. Because if you have your head looking back at whoever it was, maybe it was someone you loved deeply who left you, and you're in mourning and regret and you're depressed, well, you're not going to be a good candidate for someone, even if Prince Charming came along, the most wonderful guy in the world.
You're right. Who would want that, right?
That's right.
They're not looking for that. Maybe they had that before and they're looking for something totally different.
Yes.
And they want to be happy too. Why do women put this little thing on themselves that, yes, I'm short, I'm old, I'm fat, nobody wants me? Why do we criticize ourselves like that? Why don't we just sort of, accept it and, go out there with a new attitude? Well, why do we kill ourselves?
Because we live in a very critical, judgmental culture. Every time you put on the TV or read a magazine, it's really being critical and judgmental about people. And so it's very easy for women to feel that they're old, even when they're in their 30s and 40s, and too fat, and too this and too that, and not good enough. And women are definitely getting that message on a stronger level than men. There's a lot of men who may not be wonderful physical specimens, but they feel better about
They
themselves. Their
do, don't they?
self-esteem.
They
Yes,
always feel good about them. It's
yes.
funny. I always say this, that when a man gets old, he looks great. A man with a little bit of the gray hair, and even if he has a couple of wrinkles, he looks distinguished. He looks great. You have a woman with a couple of wrinkles and gray hair, she doesn't look so hot.
Well, I'll never forget, Nina, when I was dating and after my divorce, and I would go to a singles dance or an event, and there would be these fat, unattractive guys standing around talking together
Hmm.
and pointing at heavy women and saying, "Look at that fat one, look at that one." And these guys were terrible looking men, but they were so critical and judgmental about the women there. And that's part of the problem, is that everyone buys that the women have to look and be at a different standard. And the men, they've never looked down. I used to be so angry when I would see people like that, because it infuriated me
Yeah.
that they never looked in the mirror.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's funny because I'm living in Vegas, and I have seen the strangest older men here that I've ever seen in my life. The majority of them, they're older and they've got the big belly, but they
Hmm.
all wear they all wear these shorts that sort of cut off above the knee, and they have these white socks on and tennis shoes. And I thought, and this is in the evening in some of the casinos, and I look at it and I say, if I ever see another man dressed like that, I'm going to shoot myself. Because and I don't know what, I'm trying to figure out, what do they think they're going to find dressed like that if they're out trying to find a woman? What do they think they're going to find?
They
What would
think
they
they
find?
look wonderful.
Oh, oh, they do. Well, let me tell you, they don't.
I
They,
know.
they really. Have
I
you
know.
written any books about women and
I've written
men?
courses and programs. I have a women dating rescue program, which is a 10-week e-course. Every week you get another section, and it has exercises in it. So after you read the material, it has journaling and exercises and questions to answer, and it really moves you to the next level of understanding yourself and helping you boost your self-esteem. And then I also have the Create Your Ideal Relationship Kit for women over 40, which includes ebooks and audio tapes and a number of special reports all put together. It's a digital product, and you get that, and it gives you step by step information on working on all of these things: where to go to look for dates, how to feel good about yourself, how to get rid of the past baggage, and how to know when you found a keeper.
The keeper,
Because
yeah.
yes,
How do you now? Where do these? I'm going to go into the women of probably about 60 or 70, because there's a lot of them out there because their husbands have passed away, or they
yes.
have after 30, 40 years got a divorce. But mostly their husbands have passed away. How do they? Where do they go to actually find a guy compatible to what they want?
The best thing to do for all singles, including the older ones, is to get passionate about something you love and show up there, rather than going to places where you think other singles will be. It doesn't work. If you love the theater or concerts or gardening or interior design or boating or whatever it is that you really love, go there and hang out, because other people who share your interests are going to be there too. Go to lectures, go to museums and art galleries, go to certain movies or bookstores. Whatever it is, you'll find other people that you could strike up a conversation with, because you never know if the woman next to you has a brother or a cousin or a neighbor who's a perfect match for you. So when you're doing natural things, when you're living your life and you're enjoying your life and you're not sitting at home waiting for life to find you, you're much more likely to bump into the perfect person for you.
Yeah, because you're never going to see anybody coming along and knocking at your door.
Exactly.
That doesn't happen. So, it's funny
Exactly.
you should say that, because I've always said, if you want to meet somebody that goes to Starbucks, then I suggest you go to Starbucks. If you want to
Exactly.
meet somebody that's going to who loves museums, and you love museums, and go to the museums. And this is where you'll find the people you actually need. I don't think we all know that. What happens to a lot of these women that they all think, because I've seen them, I'm living in Vegas, so I know what goes on here. They
Yeah.
all go to the bars and they all
Yes.
go to the happy hour. Now, when they go to this happy hour, which I think might be quite good for some people, I personally don't care for it. But when you go to happy hour, you're kind of putting a price on yourself as I'm here because I can get a cheaper drink. And then the guys are there for a cheaper drink too.
Exactly. Yeah, what happens is that people do the same thing and then they keep expecting different results. And as we all know, that's the definition of insanity. So you have to think out of the box and go to the places where not everyone is hanging out. There won't be hundreds of people there, but all you need is one. And if you're
Yeah.
at a place where you have a shared interest, then you're going to be okay because you're going to find someone much more interesting that way. So start thinking about what you love and don't be following the crowd to the same old places.
Can you now you have audio coaching for the children. Do you also have that for the older people as well?
Well, it's not audio coaching for the children. It's audio coaching for the parents so that
Okay.
it's a Mastering Child-Centered Divorce 10-hour audio coaching program, and it's audios and a workbook, and it takes parents step by step in understanding what the children are needing, signs to look for if the children are having problems, ways to communicate with your ex so you could co-parent more effectively, how to deal with problems that come up, how to work on your own self-esteem so you could get back out there into the world and start over again. Answers to all kinds of questions that parents have for children at different ages and what to expect for children at different ages, because divorce with a 3-year-old and with a 13-year-old, of course, is vastly different.
Of course, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask a little bit about this gun control thing because we just had this big, where all these children were actually shot and murdered and all this stuff. And how does a parent keep an eye on their child and why do parents have guns in their homes or whatever, however many? Why don't they think about that child getting hold of that gun? Even if the parent is out for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, that child could go and get that gun and who knows what they could do with it. Obviously, we've seen a lot of what they have done with it. How does a parent find out what their child is up to? Are they afraid of nosing into the child when it gets to about 14, 16 and the child says, well, I don't go into my bedroom, don't do this, don't do that, which means there's something going on.
I think there is some of that going on when children get older. Parents are intimidated to go in and find out. But I think what we mentioned earlier on is the fact that parents are not thinking about consequences of anything they're doing. Because as dangerous as guns are, there's poison and there's other accidents that happen in families just because they're not thinking. So it's with the guns, you would think it would be a no-brainer not to have children and guns in the same environment. I can't believe it, but there are people for whom culturally it's part of their world. In that case, you have to make special attention to make sure that your children understand that they should never be around the gun, or especially a loaded gun, and all of those things. But it's a matter of understanding consequences and parents thinking ahead.
Yeah.
They don't think before they do things, and unfortunately the results are very, very sad.
They are extremely sad, and it's funny. I was talking to a gentleman in Malibu in Los Angeles, and I was talking to him about a young girl I had had on my show, and I was telling him this incredible story about this girl and everything else. As it turned out, it was his daughter.
Oh,
And it was amazing. He said, "Oh, you're the one that did that show," and I said, "Yes." And what had happened was, the daughter's friend was in the house. The children were in the house by themselves, and this gun was put away in a suitcase or someplace up in one of the bedrooms. But it was very open, and the girl came out and she got the gun and she was holding the gun and she's looking and she accidentally shot it and shot her friend in the neck. Fortunately, everything turned out okay, but they don't understand the danger of this, and I don't think there's. I mean, if you have a gun in your home, you're going to have it loaded, I would imagine. Otherwise, what's the point of having a gun if you don't have it loaded to protect yourself. That's the whole idea, I think, is to protect you. And if you're not going to protect yourself with the gun, then you don't really need it. And if you do want to protect yourself with the gun, you're going to have it loaded. So therefore you have, I don't think people really realize the dangers of all this. And children are inquisitive though, aren't they? I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh, of course. Yes, I totally agree.
what can you can't, sort of, and now where can people get hold of, you have this pamphlet or something, a book or something?
I have a free ebook to give
Yeah,
to
the ebook.
everyone. Yes, it's called Post-Divorce Parenting: Success Strategies for Getting It Right. And if they go to childcentereddivorce.com, they could just add their email address and it automatically comes right to them. Childcentereddivorce.com. They'll get the free ebook, and there's tons of free information, advice, a free newsletter, lots of other information, and coaching services available as well.
Okay, awesome. You've got something written down here which is fascinating to me, which might help our audience out there. Are you guilty? I mean, how many people listening to this show that we're putting on right now to help them, how many people do you think are guilty?
Well, I think a lot of us, especially people who are divorced, I was riddled with guilt. And that's why when my son came to me as an adult and told me that he thought I did a great job, it was so meaningful for me. I think a lot of parents who are divorced are guilty. And the best way of handling that is talk to your children. When you see they're acting in funny ways, if you see they're hurt, if you see they're upset, and they hold things in, they don't want to upset you more than they know you're already upset. So it's important to talk to them and ask open-ended questions. Don't be judging them. Don't be lecturing them. Just ask about how they're feeling about things. And the best way to ask them and the best time is not sitting down face to face and staring at them, because kids don't open up. But when you're driving in the car, you're taking the kids to Little League or driving them home from school or something, you could ask some casual questions because they're facing forward, they're looking around, and you could just open the door to say, how did you feel about what Dad said last night? What do you think about spending Thanksgiving with Mom this year? Those kinds of things. And just open the door and listen. Parents need to be good listeners, because if the child feels heard, they'll continue talking and saying something. If they feel that they're being shut off by parents, and you know how easily we do that.
We do that all the time. And it's funny because that was also another one of my great things was to tell parents that when a child asks a question about something they're doing, don't immediately interject your story, which is going to go on for hours probably, of what you did and how you did it. And all the child was because their mind it's like it goes in and passes through and disappears, and then they forget all about what they were asking, because their mindset is very, very fast and it moves fast. So should we teach parents just to sort of listen more to their children and not talk about their story?
Yes, listening gives you tremendous insights. When you listen and when you paraphrase back what you think you heard, very often you'll find that you missed something, even when you thought you were listening. That's why repeating back and paraphrasing and saying something like, so it sounds like what you're telling me is such and such, or if I heard you right, this is what you mean. And someone will correct you. And if you do that with your spouse, or if you do that with your children, you're much more likely to let them feel that you care enough to hear them. And then they're more likely to listen to you. And you could say, so now I understand your point, and I understand why you feel that way, but Mom doesn't feel that way. And I have to disagree about that. But it's a much more agreeable way of saying it.
Yeah, it's like getting the child or whomever you're talking to get the confidence with you and to understand that you are listening to them, you care about them, and you're trying to answer them in the right way. It's trying to get them that you're being honest and truthful, and the trust is actually trust.
Yes, good point.
Yeah, it's trust of trusting somebody or trusting whomever. How young do you think you should start sort of trying to gain this with your child? As young as possible, or the day they're born? The day they're born?
Right from the beginning, if you have conversation, and your children, if they feel heard, they'll continue talking to you. My son always confided in me. He confided in me right through school and into college. about girlfriends as well as school issues and other things in his life because he felt that he wasn't going to be judged or put down. And we still have a very open relationship. And I think that was because I tried so hard to remember to not to do the things my mother did because she made every mistake in the books.
Do you know, that's so funny you should say it, because so many mothers and fathers are always saying, I don't want to do the same as my mother and father did. And then they sort of go to the other end of the totem pole and completely louse it all up. And it comes out a total mess. Why are we so like that? Why do we just want to keep changing things? And, you know, we're not changing things for the better, I don't believe, with our children. I think we're losing the grips. A lot of lonely children out there.
Yeah.
How do we get this back together?
Well, these are very tough times to be young. The world is so technologically oriented, and it is easy to be very alone. And then this new generation is into everything being alone. They will text each other rather than pick up the phone to talk, and rather than seeing each other. So it's a generation that we can't even fathom, but they grew up this way, and all we could do is remind people that deep down inside, we all have the same needs: to be heard, to be acknowledged, and to be loved.
But they don't
That's
know that. But they don't
no,
know that because they
no.
haven't been taught that, because you're right, they're texty and everything. And I mean, I love advancement. I love everything that's going on. I absolutely think it's amazing. But at the same time, I'm looking at it like, what are we doing to our children? We're giving them, instead of the television, we're now giving them computer, we're giving them phones. I see little kids of 5 and 6 years old on the
Yeah.
phone. Now they say that they've only given the phone for an emergency. Well, at a 5-year-old, there's enough people who should be around for an emergency.
I would think.
Well, so why are we doing this to our children? Then we turn around and say, oh, they've got no manners, they don't communicate, they don't talk to you, but we've allowed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Why have we allowed it? I mean, it's hard, because then the kid turns around and says, well, my mother allows this and my dad allows that, and now you don't allow it. So they'll say, okay, Mum, I'll do what you say. And then as soon as they close the door and they've left home, they're doing the same thing again.
Well, people are like sheep, and they follow one another. And leaders stand apart, and there's a lot of people who are following. And when we don't have a lot of really great leaders, especially for the younger generation out there who are role models for them. And that's lacking. So they see a lot of people out there every time they turn on the TV or the computer. There are people making a lot of noise and getting a lot of media attention, but they're not necessarily giving a wholesome role model a message. And children are not getting the values that we certainly believe they should be getting.
Absolutely. What do you think about this, blame the children, blame the teacher? It's always like blaming somebody. We're blaming the teachers a lot. And I know personally there's a lot of teachers, well, not a lot, but there are teachers out there that aren't teaching the way they should be teaching. But then also, they have a big problem with these kids.
Oh,
Teachers'
yes.
fault? Teachers, how do the teachers cope with this? What is their best
Yeah.
angle?
Oh, it's very difficult to be a teacher today. Teachers are unsung heroes and not given the respect that they deserve in our culture, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Again, it's the parents. The parents have to be teaching respect for teachers, and they have to be communicating with the teacher, with the schools, and with the children. The parents can't step away and then expect their children to just grow up okay.
Absolutely, you're so right on that. We're getting close to the end of our show. And so I think the message we're trying to get out there, Rosalind, is that communicate with your children, don't judge
Mm-hmm.
them, talk
Mm-hmm.
with them, not at them.
Yes.
Make sure they
Yes.
have respect for their other siblings, so if they're with their brothers or sisters, make sure that they're having a contact with them as well. And also
Mm-hmm.
making sure that they're respecting their parents and also respecting their teachers, because the teachers are there to teach them what's going to go on in their life for the rest of their world.
Yes, that's right.
Absolutely. Now, give me another shout out for where they can reach you, Rosalind.
Yes. The Child Centered Divorce Network has all this information, all the resources that any parent could want if they're dealing with divorce and separation issues, and that's childcentereddivorce.com. My book is at howdoitellthekids.com. And the dating information is at womendatingrescue.com.
Awesome. That's amazing. On that, we're going to have to close the show out. You have been watching Ninon Speaks Media Image, and we had our guest today, Rosalind Sadaka. And thank you, everybody, for viewing us. And I hope we've helped you out there, especially our younger generation, because they are my hearts. I love them all, and they're wonderful. Thank you again for watching. Thank you, Rosalind, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
You take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Watch the Maxed Out Money Hour Internet TV show program All About Money with your hosts Ninon and Coach Steve every Tuesday evening at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central at realcoachingradio.net.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Kids Talk Foundation, a global nonprofit organization providing youth advocacy, television programming, and training services in the United States, along with comprehensive medical and educational services for the developing world. Most recently in Kenya, Africa, where Kids Talk Foundation provides a feeding program, medical care, and educational services to over 1,300 young people each day. Please help our youth and place your donation. Go to www.kidstalk.org.
You're watching and listening to Conscious Evolution Media, shifting global consciousness at consciousevolutionmedia.com.